Hello, today we are joined by Ali Hunter Blair. Ali graduated in 2008 and has since graced our screens various times, starting off with First Time Farmers. He's also appeared on Inside Out and Countryfile, and probably most notably as one of the stars of Quest's Born Mucky series. He is also the king of combine karaoke, and you will often see him wearing his RAU SU stash in his social media posts. And today we're thrilled because he's very kindly agreed to headline the RAU 175 alumni webinars, but for one day only. So thank you very much for joining us, Ali. And what have we pulled you away from today on the farm?
Well, thank you very much. That's a lovely introduction. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me. So I'm very pleased with that. I think we should probably stop there. Today, what are we doing today? I'm having a really Monday kind of Tuesday, if I'm completely honest with you. I've had a blocked drain to deal with. I've been to the dentist. My face is actually only just coming back to being less numb. I've got a toddler who is currently asleep, twins who are, I can actually just hear in the background, but hopefully no one else can. And there's some farming to do as well. But just a standard day at Weir End Farm at the moment.
Just the standard day, yeah. And I suppose that takes me on to one of my first questions, really. Your farm is in a really interesting location because you've got the main road, you've got the river to tackle, and I know the floods in 2020 were a particular challenge for you on the farm. What's the sort of best and worst things about where the farm is, and how do you tackle that?
Again, it depends sort of what mood you catch me in. If I'm in a bad mood, I've got the worst of both worlds because we've got droughty Ross sand that likes to dry out at the best any opportunity, like it is this year, or I've got riverland that floods and in a wet year is underwater for 6 months of the year. But flip side of that is in a dry year, the riverland is fantastic because it's just a bottomless river alluvium and just carries on growing. And in a wet year, the top land drains freely. So yeah, depending on how I'm feeling is depending on how I describe it. But yeah, we've got the dual carriageway as well, which we have to cross with everything, which is interesting. I haven't ever trusted anyone else to do it since I've come back, since my tractor driver taught me how to do it, because it's terrifying, frankly, and I just don't want to be putting anyone else into that position. So yeah, there's challenges here. There's challenges here, but as you say, we live in a beautiful part of the world, and that's something, especially in the last 2 years, that I suppose we've sort of capitalised on with the introduction of glamping into the farm business, which sort of started terribly because of COVID, but then actually was fantastic because of COVID in that weird sort of world that we lived in for the last 2 years. So yeah, there's the classic sort of challenges and opportunities.
Well, that's kind of typical of what I would say I've seen of you on TV and on social media. You're sort of slightly self-deprecating take on farming, but it's really refreshing to have that honest and transparent view of what working life on the farm is like. How's farming by Instagram poll going? How's that experiment going for you?
So far people are pretty good, actually. It's something that is obviously just a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's a really nice way to engage with followers. And I don't strike myself as anything other than just another farmer that posts his Instagram, but I have a bit of a following because of TV and stuff, and yeah, I am self-deprecating, I suppose, because that's my sense of humor. That's the way that I'm wired, I suppose. I don't mind taking the mick out of myself. I don't mind other people taking the mick out of me to some extent. Sometimes I bite, most of the time I don't, depending on how tired I am at the moment. My fuse is probably a little bit shorter for people telling me that I bought the wrong tractor and I should go and buy a Fendt or whatever else. But yeah, it works pretty well. It's a really nice way to engage. You get some interesting opinions, especially when you're sort of asking these random questions that I tend to ask about how it all works. And it's something that, yeah, it's a nice way to sort of interact with people, and I suppose it almost removes loneliness from some parts of the job.
Loneliness, I guess, is an interesting one. We are currently at the RAU doing some work around how we engage with all sorts of things, but including mental health and farmers' mental health. And it's something that I think is being picked on a lot more nowadays. But have you found, without wanting to go too deeply, obviously, have you found that Instagram and social media has been a help or a hindrance? Because it can be a bit of a wild west out there.
I think that's a massive question, and it's something that's really, really apt. Social media can be the worst thing in the world, full stop. There's, Twitter especially at times can be an absolute sewer. But for my part, I find it 95% positive. I think now that I'm older, as my best friend Nick would say, my ducks are in a row. I'm not trying to be anybody else. I don't really care what people think, and that sounds really arrogant and sort of, but I don't mind if people think I'm an idiot. That's part and parcel with the job, really, and that's sort of the character I suppose I play in a way, but it can be vile especially for younger people, and I've got quite a few that follow me, and I've got a few people that engage actually, quite a few more that probably engage than would have done previously. And you know, you get messages of people saying that they've been struggling, or people that, you know, people have been getting onto them. And I'm not a counsellor, I'm a farmer, but you can just offer people advice, and you know, you can just say that it isn't real, and that's the most important thing of social media. The stuff that I put on social media is as accurate a depiction of my life as I think I can see. But from a parenting point, you're never going to see a photo of my screaming toddler when she's having a meltdown, because no one wants to see that, and that's not the image I would want to portray of my children, because I love them dearly and 90% of the time they're great. And the same with the farm. You know, I show my cock-ups because usually they're quite amusing, or they're weather related, or they're out of my control. But the majority of the stuff that I post is pretty pictures, or pictures that I see that are pretty, and pictures of machinery and things that are fairly non-controversial. I tend to steer clear of controversy just because I don't have the energy and the time to argue. And you know, I ask some interesting questions occasionally, and I get some interesting opinions back from people. But yeah, the social media thing is something that I've had to learn quite quickly, I suppose. I mean, we're in mid-30s. We're in that sort of interim period where social media, like the influencers are all, the proper influencers are all younger than us. They're like mid-20s. And then like the TV guys are all older than us, like the proper, like the Adam Hensons of this world, the proper TV. And we're in this interim period where, you know, people younger than me, all they watch is YouTube. That's all they never watch mainstream television. Whereas Annie and I, we still very much sit down and love a BBC drama and that sort of thing. And I suppose we're sort of bridging that gap. And it's something that I've had to learn, especially with the TV stuff. You do get criticism, and you know, rightfully so. If you're going to put yourself onto the television in front of, you know, with First Time Farmers it was millions, with Quest it's probably hundreds of thousands. Not everyone is going to like you, and accepting that was something that I didn't do very well in First Time Farmers when I was 25, because I thought I was a relatively nice guy. I didn't think I came across particularly stupid, and some of the comments on forums in those days were pretty horrendous. And there was one particular one on a farming forum that now no longer exists, and it was just a savage attack on me, my family, everything about my life. And I was irate, so I wrote a really long-winded response, and I wasn't allowed to post for 24 hours after joining. So Annie was saying, which is my girlfriend, who's now my wife, Annie, she was saying, look, just don't post it. There's no point, you know, just sleep on it. And I couldn't post, which was what stopped me. And I slept on it, and I woke up the next morning, and actually there was a hell of a lot of people defending me on this forum, and I never sent it. And I still got it actually saved in one of my cloud drives, just because it was quite well worded actually, I thought, my response. But not sending it was the best thing I did, because had I sent it, I A, would have just fed the troll that was writing it, and B, got into an argument with somebody that obviously already forged their opinion of me, and you're not going to change that opinion. And what somebody said, that 80% of people like you, 10% of people love you, and 10% of people will hate you. You're never going to change those 10% that hate you, so don't try to.
I think that's incredibly sage advice, and that sleep on it thing is really important, because you always need that time to reflect, especially when you're angry, but even when you're excited, you need that time to kind of think it through. Speaking of sleep, what gives you more sleepless nights, the farm or 3 under 3?
3 under 3 at the moment. Without a shadow of a doubt. I can sleep fairly comfortably with the farm. Yeah, 3 under 3 is pretty hardcore at the moment. Actually, the twins are just starting to get into a little bit of a routine, and now the toddler, we've moved her into a bed, and just she's changing, bless her. She's been amazing for 2.5 years, and then the last couple of weeks she's just stretching her muscles a little bit, and also realizing that the twins aren't as much fun as she thought they were originally. They take mummy away from her a lot, they take daddy, you know. And so, the kids are causing me a lot less sleep than the farm is. The farm at the moment we're in that period where we've done everything we can. The weather hasn't been terrible, but it hasn't been brilliant. So I've got much better now, again, as I've got older, and I sound more and more like my dad every day. But there's not much we can do about the weather, which controls 75-80% of the output of our farm. And that's something that with the glamping and with the horses that Annie runs, like that's something that we're trying to change as a business, because the weather is pants, frankly. It always is doing something wrong, and farmers always whinge about it, but it's accurate. So yeah, the farm, I have learned to do the best job I possibly can, and then accept whatever we get in the rest of it.
I think that's a very philosophical attitude. Fair play.
I think that's just a tiredness.
Yeah, maybe. Well, just on a slight twist on that, I mean, I know that you were at Three Counties the other weekend and talking to big groups and that sort of thing, which is fantastic, and getting farming out there a bit. And now that you've got children of your own, do you see that as something that you'd like to do more of? And I mean, obviously, I think it's very important. I work for the RAU, but getting children into agriculture and farming and land more generally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the simple answer is yes. It's the reason I did TV to start off with is because I wanted to get farming out there in a more sort of warts and all type approach than potentially, like, you know, Countryfile is still the biggest farming program, whether you disagree with it or agree with it. It still puts agriculture of a type in front of 7.5 million viewers, or whatever it is, 6.5 million viewers these days, week in, week out. And it gets a lot of stick. Sometimes that's accurate. Sometimes I think that's slightly unfair, because it's successful. It's been running for years, and it is still successful and running for years. So they're obviously doing something right. Whether we as farmers agree with what they're doing is sometimes different, but I think it's really important. Like the thing we did at the Three Counties, you know, I got a phone call a month before saying we'd like to do something machinery based in the main arena to try and get farming back into the Three Counties ring that isn't sort of draft horses or old vintage tractors. We want to talk about farming. Would you like to do it? And absolutely, of course I would. And then after that, I said, oh, we've got Adam Henson coming down for the first day because he's the show's president or whatever, and then Caleb is booked for the second day. And I was like, yeah, brilliant. That's great. That would be fantastic. And we went out and we did it. And the Friday they really did good at Three Counties. They sent out like 5,000 free tickets for school children, and I think they had 1,000 turn up. But they did that first morning with Adam, who is fantastic at what he does, which is talk to people in a language they understand and put farming across in such a fun but interesting way that you end up learning when you didn't necessarily want to be taught. And I think that's something that I would really like to do, and it's something that I would like to do more of, is that, and it's the same with Clarkson's Farm, actually, with Caleb and Clarkson's Farm. Clarkson's Farm is so successful because it is entertaining, yet also teaches people that didn't think they wanted to learn. And that is something that's a really hard thing to create. Like Bull Mucky was a great show, but it was very much Discovery, and Discovery's model, which is problem solution. Oh no, sorry, it's idea problem solution. So that's the way it works. And every episode of a Discovery program works in exactly the same way. You have the idea, there's a problem halfway along the way, and then you have a successful or non-successful solution. And that's the way their episodes are structured. Whereas Clarkson's Farm was, it was basically Top Gear recreated. He created a merry band of men and women who got on, who didn't mind abusing one another, and in the end became sort of like a family. And that's what people really engaged with. And like people on my social media, when I posted a picture of a tram line, they're like, didn't know what a tram line was before Clarkson's Farm. And that's because he has created, to be honest, if I'm completely honest, he's created the program I've always wanted to create, which is I wanted to teach people to farm by learning how to farm. But now I realize that you firstly need somebody who's good in front of a camera as Jeremy Clarkson, who doesn't care what people think about him more so than I do, is very quick-witted, and also was genuinely learning how to farm and genuinely cared. If you had a farmer learning how to farm or trying to teach how to farm, it would look ridiculous now that I've seen it, now that I think about it, because viewers would be there going, well, you should have known that. Whereas this was different, and that's what made it so successful. But it's definitely something that I would like to carry on doing. It's something that we do Open Farm Sunday. I have done it twice. We'd hopefully do it again. I'm banned from projects for a year whilst the twins are growing up and everything else. But that's exactly the same. That gets people who have made an active decision to come to a farm, and you don't teach them, you don't lecture them, you don't preach at them. You give them an enjoyable day out, and they take away a piece of information. And that's how I think, that's the way I believe that we should be getting through to younger people, getting through to the next generation, and getting people interested in what it is that farms are doing, because farms aren't now just growing wheat. They're not just growing farms. You know, even our little farm, we're doing equestrian, we're doing glamping, we do a bit of TV, we do grow crops, we make hay, we have some stock. You know, it's not just a case of, oh, it's a farm growing 1 million acres of wheat. That's not what a farm is. And yeah, if you can get people onto farm, that's something that I love doing. But I suppose you've got to want to, and you've also got to not, I hate the phrase general public, but you've got to not be afraid to have people here and have people asking difficult questions or tricky questions. And you haven't got to have the answers for them. I think that's something that's really important in any sort of public engagement. You're an expert in your farm, but you're not an expert in the entire world or global politics. Actually, one of the questions we had with Caleb on the Saturday was, some chap really went to town on the fact that diesel was killing the world and hydrogen was going to be the answer. And you're like, okay, there's a load of other people that want to ask questions, but you've really, and he kept coming back and back about how hydrogen was going to be the future and how we should all be investing in. And, you know, Caleb and I sat there as farmers being like, you know, if it works, great. But at the moment, storing a large amount of hydrogen on the farm doesn't seem like a particularly good idea. Also, how are we going to do that? JCB have invested millions in it. And he just kept pushing that point. And you're like, towards the end, you go, look, this is all we know about it. Can we move on to another question? Because we're not experts in hydrogen. And so it's just, yeah, making sure that if somebody has got an agenda, you let them have their say. And if you don't know the answer, tell them you don't know the answer.
I think that applies for most walks of life, to be honest. It's always better to admit that you don't know the answer than try and bluff on. So I won't ask you any more big and scary questions. We'll stick to something a bit more lighthearted. Just one of the questions we ask everybody we speak to is, if you weren't doing what you're doing, so if you weren't doing farming, what would you have loved to have had a go at as an alternative?
What would I have loved? Well, rugby was always going to be a sort of career number 2, had my shoulders not given up on me whilst I was at college. But yes, I did a bit of that. I'd be doing something in computers probably. Computers, technology. I'll probably still be working in the ag sector, working on something a bit more geeky and exciting, like this. The small robot company and stuff like that is fascinating at the moment. Got a friend that works in San Francisco on drone deploy, which is drones like that are mapping fields, 3D mapping quarries to RTK accuracy, that sort of thing. So I think it would be down that road. The bit that excites me about farming is the tech side, and I've always been a bit of a ginger computer geek, frankly. But that's the side that would really sort of, yeah, that makes me tick, and something that I would have liked to have spent more time with. That or a Formula One driver would be cool, but not that talented, sadly.
Yeah, Formula One would be really cool. Although maybe not at the moment. It's all a bit fraught and a bit political at the moment.
It is, yeah. Well, that just seems to be the way of everything, doesn't it? It doesn't matter what sort of sport seems to be getting more political in by the minute, whether that be swimming, whether that be F1, whether that be football. You know, it's all, or even recently golf. You know, sport just seems to be letting politics get in the way of what should be its own entity, and I think that's something that is concerning. I want to go and watch rugby or tennis or cricket because I want to see the best people playing, and I want to go and watch sport. I don't want to watch sport without people because some country has invaded another, and you know, it's just trying to keep that politics out of life at the moment is quite hard work. Yeah.
Well, let's look a little backwards then, given that everything's very political at the moment. Let's look right back to when you were going to university, and what was it that made you choose the RAU in the first place?
I'd always, so firstly, my old man is an alumni as well. So Dad was there back when only men were allowed. So I can't even remember when I think he went there in the 50s, potentially 50s. So yeah, years ago, bless him. So he had always had a soft spot for Siren, and it was close to home as well, which is a consideration. Also the course that I wanted to do, so I didn't think I was going to be clever enough, frankly, to get the A levels to do a degree. So I applied for a diploma, and applied for a diploma at Siren, at the other one with the blue and yellow, which we won't talk about, but then, and Hartbury. And then when my A levels came through, I did well enough to have a degree. In 2005, farming was looking a little bit ropey. So the old man was like, do a degree, because then you've got a BSc to your name. And it was in that time where having a degree meant a lot. And it still obviously means a lot, but you know, the whole sort of every other part is still adding up to that now. But So cirencester did a 3-year degree and not a 4. That was a big thing for me. My old man is older, and I sort of wanted to get back to the farm as quickly as possible. So that was part of it. Also, I came round and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I got shown around by a guy called Dangerous Dave, who will forever live with me as the bloke that showed me around with his umbrella. It looked something like Hogwarts, if I'm completely honest. But he was just so enthused by cirencester and about how he hadn't actually been wanting to come to cirencester. He wanted to go somewhere else, and he'd come, and he loved it more than he ever thought he would. And he was just so engaging as we were being shown around. And I think that's something that it was really nice to be shown around by a current student, because he was just so enthused by it. And it became a very simple choice in the end. It was cirencester or not at all, really. And it was, the best 3 years of my life.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. That is really lovely to hear. And what sort of opportunities came out of your time at cirencester? Was there anything in particular that you got out of having been at cirencester in particular?
I think that, and it gets talked about a lot, and I think I suppose it's part of the sales pitch of cirencester, is the address book is phenomenal. The contacts that you have within whatever industry that is, whether, obviously my sector was agriculture, but like the business side, the equestrian side, you're just there going, the places like the equestrian, I mean, Peter Morris seemed to be very good at getting people to places that were very exciting, that also happened to have rugby matches on at the same time. But the places he could get to, and the places that we could get to as students, where I remember going around Poskets, who doesn't allow people around them, like the biggest carrot producer in the country, probably in Europe, if not before, starting their harvesting expedition down in Spain all the way up through to Scotland. I just remember going around there being like, people don't get this access. And that sort of contact book going forward means that, it actually helped start the TV stuff, because the TV stuff went around by a friend of mine, Will, who works for Savills. He started as an undergrad, and the TV guys went to Savills as a business and said, this is First Time Farmers, said, we want to make a program about farming. Do you know anyone that might be any good? And Savills then Will put my name forward because he'd heard about this, and that's how it all started. So I suppose that opportunity arose from friends who I'd met at college. And yeah, I suppose the way I can describe it, like a lot of my friends from school went to different universities, and their friends from university would be, 10 years down the road, however many years down the road we are now, terrifyingly, is that they probably keep in contact with 2 or 3 of their friends from university. It's the same way that you did school. Whereas cirencester, I would have 20 people that I'm still in regular contact with. And in a college when I was there, it was only 600, I think, something like that. Not a big college. That's, you just seem to pick the right people, I suppose, as a university or as a college in those days, is that you're all there for the same sort of reason. You're all there as like-minded individuals. And I know that at times that has sometimes been a bit of a marketing discrepancy, because there is an attitude attached to it. But actually, you come out with people that you just like, and you get a degree that opens doors for you, and friends that didn't have farms to go back with. Everyone walks out of cirencester with a job, as it seems. I'm not sure, with now however far we are down the road. But in 2008, even when the recession kicked in, people were still getting jobs. And I just think that, I honestly, and I'm not just saying it, but I can't imagine my life without college now. And it's a weird thing, whereas I was so keen to get back to the farm. I wanted to be back there. I was like, I did my placement. I was like, well, I've got my 2 years now. Do I just sack that off? And then you don't sack it off, because it's just fun. And it's trying to explain that to people, where you go, yeah, well, I worked quite hard. I probably didn't work as hard as I should have done in hindsight, but Christ, I had a lot of fun.
Yes, and that is exactly the kind of way I feel about my university experience. It's yes, you work hard, and yes, you get your degree, but it's fun too. It's great fun. So we will have a number of current students and people who are applying watching this as well. So have you got any top tips, advice for new students or graduates entering agriculture at the moment?
For entering agricultural, entering college, get stuck into everything. There's so much on offer. And yeah, like that, I remember walking around the Freshers' Fair just being like, what is this? I went straight from school. And that was something I suppose that was a bit different, is that there was a lot of gap years. There probably is less now, obviously with COVID and everything else. But when I started, it was a lot of gap year guys coming back, guys and girls coming back. And I came straight from school for the obvious reasons I want to get home. And so I wasn't worldly in any way. I literally come straight out of school, got my A-levels, and suddenly walking around all these freshers fair, being like all these random societies and bits and bobs that you can get stuck into. And then I found the rugby club and everything else. But you just, there's just, and like the RAG rally, and you just get into all this sort of stuff that was just, I'd never have considered before, I suppose, with my little sheltered life, my little school, and then going up to this and having to live life on your own back in those days where it was like, I've just had my mum to do most things for me, and now here I am on my own, and oh crumbs, I'm surviving. So it's just, yeah, you're stuck in. And I think like agriculture is, as a career, I was saying this on the weekend to the Three Counties guys, I was like, I don't think there's more exciting time to be involved in agriculture. Okay, it's slightly terrifying if you're already in it and you're trying to work out how you're going to pay for the fertilizer that has just arrived, or the prices are dropping 30, 40 pounds a day, whereas it used to be £1 a day. Like, you know, there is so much manipulation in the market now. You know, one man has managed to create an entire world food crisis just because he's a bit nuts. But within that, there's so much opportunity. And like the tech side I talked about earlier, the tech side is fascinating, where farming is going, and whether that be pure farming or, you know, from a small family farming point of view, diversifying, there's making you aware of all the other opportunities, all this natural capital that we have within the farm, where even 10 years ago I never looked at, because I was like, farm, this is what I need to do. And all that sort of weird way that COVID was horrible, horrendous, terrifying, all of the things, but made you look at your business and look at your life and reassess everything. And obviously it changed from a farming point. It really didn't change our lives that much, because we could still go out and sit in our glass isolation boxes. We could still work. The weather came good as soon as lockdown was announced. But in the way that we view everything, it really made me realize that we just set up the glamping, and actually Ross on Wye is beautiful. Whereas before then, I've been like, well, there's a road in the way and it floods quite a lot, and there's not a great deal apart from coffee shops and charity shops in Ross. And suddenly your whole perspective of that flips. And yeah, it just makes you realize that there is so much more, and that has opened so much more opportunity for people wanting to get into agricultural sector, and not just from driving tractors or milking cows or whatever that is. The industries that are attached to farming are so wide ranging.
Okay, last question from me, which is, what would you want people to know, to take away about Weir End Farm and your little part of the world? What's the one or two things that you'd like people to always remember about you?
Don't believe everything you see on Instagram. Yeah, no, that's probably not it. That's probably is it actually. But yes, so I don't know. I think the fact that we're trying to farm our farm in the best of the way that we can, because again, having children changes that whole dynamic. I now have a reason to farm for the next generation, for people that, you know, might want to take over. They might not. They might want to go and do something else, and that's absolutely fine. But yeah, we're trying to do the best we can. We're trying to have fun with it, and just, you know, you spend a lot of your time working, so if you don't enjoy it, there's not much, you know, there's not much point to it. You know, we spend far too many hours doing what we do, so you've got to enjoy it, and we try and enjoy ourselves as much as we can whilst we're working. And we have the beautiful and lucky situation where I can have my wife, my mum and dad, my kids all within our work zone, and we get to create a life and a livelihood for us in 500 acres of Herefordshire.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Ali. It's been fascinating, really great insight. And we will pop up your social tags on our slide so people can come and find you and follow you and say nice things about you and not trolley things about you.
We'll see
hopefully.
After this.
Thank you very much, and we will see everyone next time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.